Okay, business owners of every shape and form, listen up, especially if you provide in-person services. Today, we are going to take a look back at March 2020 when the world first shut down because of COVID-19. Hard to believe that it's been almost 3 years. During that time, TLP has provided tons, and I mean tons of free resources from blogs to YouTube videos and lots of podcasts here on the TLP podcast. And we've also created lots of clauses to purchase and waivers and additional rescheduling and cancellation forms due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I've always been at the forefront of what was happening, what industry professionals were feeling, and what kind of client requests they were receiving. Now, during these 2.5, almost 3 years, it's been a bumpy ride, to say the least. And we saw entrepreneurs and specific industries hit incredibly hard. We also, in those, 2.5, 3 years, saw entrepreneurs rise up and protect themselves financially and, of course, legally through their contracts and additional clauses they added in. But now it looks like national shutdowns and even event restrictions are seemingly over, knock on wood. So the question many business owners are asking is whether they still need COVID waivers for their clients, COVID rescheduling clauses in their contracts, and any type of COVID acknowledgments that their clients must sign. So as mentioned, my business, The Legal Paige, and my team have always wanted to give you the best, most up-to-date information surrounding the COVID pandemic. And we're here to provide information to business owners quickly to help you stay legally protected. So with all of that being said, now it is time to update you again on the COVID situation and help you move forward to the end of 2022 and into 2023 legally, of course. So without further ado, friends, let's get into today's episode.
You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started.
As a reminder, before we get into this episode, I am legally obligated to give my disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. All legal information I talk about in this episode is intended for the masses and a large variety of different businesses. Please seek out another attorney in your city and home state if you need specific legal advice related to your unique business. Okay, let's get back to it. So everyone, the main thing to remember at this point in time, the beginning of September 2022, is that the COVID-19 virus is still an issue. People are still getting sick through variants, and the CDC still has quarantine measures in place for those that test positive. Thus, by no means is COVID-19 obsolete. However, we are now in a place where many people are vaccinated, stores and businesses are fully open, and events are happening when they're scheduled to happen. And overall, I would say the scary part of the pandemic seems to be behind us. So in the same thought process that things are shifting worldwide, you may also want to take another look at your contracts and the COVID-19 policies that your business has going forward to make sure that you're keeping up with the times. To start off this episode, I really want to get into a COVID-19 postponement and cancellation clause, and really my take on why they are a thing of the past. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, many of you probably added in the Legal Page's COVID-19 postponement and cancellation clause to your contract. That is 100% fine and was absolutely appropriate to use during the period of, I would say, March to December 2020, when new clients were trying to book with you and wanted a little pressure release on rescheduling in case of issues with hosting their wedding and or event due to COVID. If you have clients that sign contracts that include this clause, then you as a business owner at this point in time will have to stick to that policy moving forward because the agreement is already solidified between you and the clients. But as COVID-19 has become more of a permanent thing in today's world, you're now posed with having to make some, I'd say, hard business rules for not allowing rescheduling and cancellations. I am seeing more and more business owners in the wedding and event industry not allowing clients to reschedule or cancel anymore complimentary due to COVID-19. And this is for new bookings, so people that are just signing on for contracts right now. This is because if clients are choosing to plan an event right now, they are literally accepting the risks that COVID poses, and they choose to voluntarily proceed with planning with those risks involved. Not to mention, your business is willing to block out dates on your calendar and say no to other clients at this point in time, and other clients totally understand the same thing, that they're planning a wedding and or event in the middle of COVID-19, or they're just planning for your services in the middle of a pandemic if it's not a wedding or event. Thus, you cannot, as a business owner, afford to allow unending complimentary reschedules and cancellations forever. Ultimately, it makes sense for you to no longer give this quote unquote pressure release valve or open-ended rescheduling opportunity to your clients. It is something that absolutely made sense back at the beginning of the pandemic for business owners and clients alike. But at this point, I recommend something different for the foreseeable future. And I'm going to get into that in a second. But with all of this being said, I want to note that you can always run your business the way you want and have as generous of a rescheduling policy as you wish. Maybe you are medically high risk and would rather not have clients, say, chance it if they contracted COVID-19 or were close contacts of someone who had COVID. And instead, you'd rather just kind of give a little bit more wiggle room as a business owner and give them, say, one complimentary reschedule to reduce your risk. Or maybe you just don't like the idea of charging a hefty rescheduling fee and are more aligned with a flexible business mindset. And if this sounds like you, then by all means, keep the COVID-19 postponement and rescheduling clause in your contract. However, if you do allow for rescheduling, please make sure that you have an expiration for that new date and only allow one complimentary reschedule. Don't allow it to be unending time and time again, because clients will take advantage of that. I can tell you for sure that that is going to happen. Typically, I recommend that the new event date occurs within about 6 to 12 months of the original date. Now, side note, in 2022, with COVID being foreseeable and predictable, allowing for a shorter rescheduling period, I would say such as 6 months even, is 100% warranted. Just be aware that if you decide to have a free rescheduling policy for like the one-time rescheduling due to COVID for clients may and likely will take advantage of that rescheduling. So be aware that, they could just come up with any reason to reschedule and kind of blame it on COVID. And if your contract says that's allowed, then it's allowed. So clients are also notorious for canceling at the last minute due to all kinds of XYZ reasons and wanting the world when they do so. And I just say all this because I want you to be prepared. I'm in the, business policy kind of mindset and mentoring here to tell you, I really, really think you shouldn't allow this. I think clients have learned a lot over the past couple of years, and they are going to continually take advantage of a free complimentary reschedule if you allow it in your contract. Again, everyone can do what they wish with their business, but for someone who basically is always on top of what's going on in the industry, I have an entire Facebook community where people are posting things about reschedulings and cancellations still with clients. It's really this unnecessary thing that you can combat right now by just kind of putting a kibosh to it in your contracts and your business policies moving forward. And I think legally, as an attorney who's trying to kind of teach the masses and hopefully move the industry towards a little bit more of a cut and dry cancellation and rescheduling policy, I would say into 2023. This is what I suggest. So just hear me out. An acknowledgement of COVID-19 and no rescheduling clause is the way to go moving forward. So this type of clause is a resource that the Legal Page created, and I definitely recommend stays in your contract. This type of clause helps you communicate to your clients that you don't allow rescheduling due to COVID, and it thoroughly explains what your business policies are surrounding changing up the date due to fear of COVID. Rescheduling fees should apply if that's going to happen. And it also outlines to your clients that you will continue to perform services for their wedding and or event as long as you're legally able to do so. AKA, as long as there isn't a stay-at-home order in place, you contract COVID, or say you've been deemed a close contact with someone who tested positive and now you're supposed to quarantine for health and safety of others. So thus, as long as you operate your business and do what you're contracted to do for your clients, you're going to continue to do that and maintain the utmost safety and health precautions while you're providing services. Now, if your clients contract COVID, you want to explain in this type of clause what happens should that occur. Usually here, it would be similar to if you tested positive and a one-time kind of reschedule would occur. But that's like the only reason that a rescheduling would happen. But essentially, they can't just reschedule 30 days prior because they're worried about COVID. That is the biggie that you're trying to avoid. Again, if they contracted COVID or you contracted COVID, that would quite literally be the only exception to your strict rescheduling policy. And all to say, since COVID-19 is still around, it makes sense for your clients to continue to acknowledge what would happen if you or they test positive, say, a few days before or the week of the event. Again, I want you to remember that an acknowledgement of COVID and no rescheduling clause is what I suggest right now. I still want you to have a COVID clause in your contract. I just don't want you to have that kind of open-ended, complimentary, one-time rescheduling COVID clause in your contract. It's a bit different now. An acknowledgement of COVID clause really says, okay, clients, like you acknowledge COVID is a thing, you acknowledge that you're planning a wedding or event in the middle of COVID or that you want my services in the middle of COVID. And this is what the world looks like moving forward. Like you can't just plan it and then continue to reschedule. 2020 was a totally different ballgame. And that's when everyone was adding in that kind of pressure release valve rescheduling COVID clause. But now, make sure that there's no rescheduling due to COVID, except in very limited circumstances where you or the couple gets COVID, not their guests, not their immediate family. I mean, I would never have that in a contract. You can take it kind of case by case if that were to occur. And you can look like the good guy if you do something a bit above and beyond what your contract actually says. But I want your contract to be super concrete and clear on no rescheduling. They acknowledge COVID, and basically you're going to be charged a rescheduling fee if you decide to do that. Or if you cancel, you lose the retainer. My main cancellation clause applies under those circumstances. Listeners, it may be time for your business to add in a clause to your contracts whereby clients acknowledge and understand COVID is impacting the world, but still agree to host their wedding and or event no matter what guidelines are put in place, and that no complimentary reschedule will occur from your business. Because COVID is a known cause and it's unlikely to fall under force majeure anymore because it's not foreseeable and unpredictable anymore, I suggest you get a clause to protect you from this type of situation. This is why myself and other industry pros have drafted a template clause to help protect you moving forward. This clause will help you communicate to your clients that you don't allow rescheduling due to COVID, and it explains what your specific business policies are surrounding changing up a date due to fear of COVID. This is called the Acknowledgement of COVID and No Rescheduling Clause. So to purchase this clause, head over to thelegalpage.com/no rescheduling. Again, that's thelegalpaige.com/no rescheduling, all lowercase. Now let's get back to the episode. Okay, so we've gone through what COVID clause needs to be in your contract. Again, an acknowledgement of COVID and no rescheduling clause. I continually get asked the question, though, should you still send out COVID-19 liability waivers? A waiver and release of liability form has your client sign off on their knowledge of the risk of COVID, that they assume that risk, and that your business cannot be held liable under any circumstances for health effects or damages due to COVID. It additionally has them agree to kind of waive any and all potential rights to sue you under these circumstances. This waiver was used heavily back in 2020 and really at the beginning of the pandemic because it was so unknown. There were no vaccines. Nobody knew, like, if you were to give it to somebody and they were to get severely ill or potentially die from the disease, would you be held liable in some way if you were to give it to them? It was really just this waiver that everyone felt like they needed to give their clients, and it was a legal way to kind of get around the unknown, I guess, is the best way to say it. And it was an additional way to notify your clients of the risk associated with performing services at that time due to, like I said, the unknown nature of contracting COVID-19. And it had your clients release you from all liability associated with that risk. Many, and I say many, like thousands and thousands and thousands of service professionals use this waiver back at the beginning of the pandemic. It was this simple kind of one-page document for your clients to sign in addition to their main service agreement. And the reason that this was so popular back in 2020 is because your existing contracts with clients, the ones that you booked in 2019 and even 2018 for their wedding and event date in 2020, it had no COVID clause in it because we didn't even know COVID was a thing. And they had already signed their contract with you. So you needed this additional waiver and release of liability form to protect you as a business owner. It was really kind of like a one-pager document of a COVID clause that we now have in our existing contracts. So what I'm trying to say here is if you're an event service provider or photographer, videographer, DJ, wedding planner, you name it, it is really up to you whether you want your clients to continue to sign this release form. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary anymore. There are vaccines, free tests, free masks. A client has a lot of means to protect themselves from the virus. And unless they've been living under a rock for the past couple of years, they know that anyone can get COVID from anywhere at any time. So for this reason, I feel comfortable legally saying that a release of liability waiver, i.e. a COVID waiver, quote unquote, as people call them, is not necessary anymore for every client to sign. With that being said, like I always tell you on the Legal Paige podcast, you do you, my friend. You can still require clients to sign it if you feel more comfortable doing that and having that extra level of assurance. By all means, keep it and have your clients sign it. It's not going to hurt you at all. And, people like makeup artists or, any type of service providers like that may want to keep this waiver in place like a makeup artist is essentially 3 inches from a client's face or 1 inch with sometimes no mask protection. So that's different, right? Than like a wedding planner who can always try to stay a decent distance from somebody. However, it's not legally necessary at this point to use waivers. And I'm just going to boldly say that out there. I think you can kind of take it out of your legal repertoire at this point in time since COVID is so widespread, well-known, and foreseeable. Oh, and another caveat I just wanted to put in here. You guys know I love side note. If you're a travel advisor or a travel agent, you should still have a waiver and release of liability in your contract because booking travel, especially international travel, is still being hindered by COVID-19. And most people still need to be vaccinated and or have a negative COVID test result to travel to some locations. So I think it's a must moving forward to have this type of like waiver, release of liability language in your actual contract or in a separate waiver for your travel clients to sign. This goes for like international wedding planners as well. I would put this type of, clause or waiver in your legal toolkit for all of your clients still moving forward, just because it's so unknown. But if you're still domestic in the United States and all of your services are kind of regionalized and all of your clients are regionalized, then you're going to be fine. You don't need a waiver anymore. So all to say, if you are a type of service provider who's in very close contact with people, a waiver may not be a bad idea to still have people sign. It's cumbersome. They're kind of annoyed by it, but whatever. It helps you at least from, kind of being released of any liability and released of any future claims that could exist. And if you're in like the travel industry or, the planning international industry, still make sure you have this type of form or type of clause that is similar to a waiver and release of liability form for your clients to sign. And I do not expect that to change at any point soon for travel advisors and agents for the next few years. Okay, so where are we at in this episode? I've talked about an acknowledgement of COVID-19 and no rescheduling clause in your contract. Get rid of complimentary reschedules is what I legally suggest to do moving forward at the end of 2022 and into 2023. I've also suggested for the majority of service providers, you can kind of do away with any type of COVID waivers that are in addition to your main client contract, because really you're subsuming that in your COVID clause, the acknowledgement of COVID and no rescheduling clause that we've talked about. Now, the last thing that I want to make sure you do is no matter what, you always have to have core protection clauses in your contract that are going to protect you from all of kind of these unknown, unforeseeable what-if situations. And the reason I wanted to note this in this podcast is because clients are really smart now. They're really smart. Like, if there's a silver lining for people signing contracts after this pandemic, it's that people actually read contracts, know that contracts have a purpose, and really they have some power with negotiating contracts before they sign them. I think in the past, people were just so used to like, oh, nothing's bad is going to happen. It's fine. I'm just going to sign on the bottom dotted line. I'm just going to scroll through and not even read it. And I mean, my lawyer heart is obviously happy. You've heard me say this many times on this podcast. Like, that type of silver lining makes a contract lawyer really happy. Service providers and people who are issuing the contracts are more like laser focused on what their contract language says, which is a good thing. And I'm smiling really big right now. But clients on the other end are also very in tune with what the contracts are saying that they're signing. So no matter what contract you have, or whether COVID-19 is still a concern in the future, like 3, 5, 10 years down the road, you still always need to have certain clauses to protect yourself in the event of an unforeseen event, such as injuries to you or the parties involved, or other acts of God, right? Clients are like, well, what if a hurricane happens or a wildfire happens or a tornado happens? Like, they're asking those questions now, which is a good thing. And you should have answers for them. And you should have clauses in your contract to protect you from those situations. And also, what are your business policies in those situations? You also need to have very, very clear language in your contract surrounding voluntary client cancellations and rescheduling situations, because that's going to happen moving forward. And they're going to think, oh, they're really flexible and they allowed it back during the pandemic. They would allow it now. No, your policies are very clear cut when it comes to that. What about unsafe working conditions if something were to occur, or extreme inclement weather, or verbal or sexual harassment from your clients or someone close to your clients that is now getting involved in the contractual relationship? I have seen it all. So protect yourself from all these situations and make sure you have these clauses in your contract. I suggest that while, of course, you should be protected within your contract, remember, if you take away anything from this episode, take away this. Well, also take away the acknowledgement of COVID and no rescheduling clause is what you should use moving forward. But you should always have two-sided contracts that additionally grant your clients some rights and responsibilities under the agreement with you. You, of course, need to be protected first and foremost, but protection clauses are usually the most two-sided clauses in your contract because they should ensure your clients also feel comfortable signing because there's language in that clause protecting them from non-performance or future payments due to unforeseeable, unpredictable events that would kind of either make the contract pause or terminate altogether. And when you have these types of clauses in your contract, protection clauses like this that are dual-sided protection clauses, you feel comfortable signing and your clients are like, oh, heck yes, this person also cares about me and the unforeseeability that I see. So make sure that protection clauses also help your clients understand what is acceptable, right? Such as non-harassment behavior from them or their guests. Minor inclement weather is acceptable versus extreme inclement weather is different. And here are my policies on that. And then, how unpredictable tornadoes, say, differ from COVID-19. That is so foreseeable and well-known and widespread. Protection clauses as a whole put everything out in the open about you and your client's expectations from the start of your relationship. And this is why having the right protection clauses in your contract is absolutely crucial. So you can write this list down or you can come back to this podcast right now at this moment in time. So kind of document, and timestamp it. I recommend the following protection clauses in your contract: a cancellation clause, a rescheduling clause, an inclement weather clause, a safe working environment clause, client's responsibility to secure insurance clause, an indemnification clause, a limitation of liability clause, a force majeure clause, and a cancellation of services by company clause. You should be looking at your business from a bird's eye view and asking yourself, do I have a plan A, B, C, D, and potentially even E in place so that I'm ready for any of these situations? Also, when you have these clauses in your contract, and I kind of alluded to this, be ready to answer questions from your clients about crazy weather, severe injuries, who should be getting insurance, what happens if there's another pandemic, what if I need to cancel for XYZ reasons, what's your rescheduling policy, if I'm having some type of destination or international wedding. Now, I know I said that you should kind of timestamp those clauses or write them down that I just listed out, but that was a hefty list. There's about 10 plus protection clauses that you absolutely need to make sure are in your contract. Don't worry, I've got you. I have a checklist that is free and it has all of the protection clauses for you. It lists all of them out, what they mean, and then you can have your existing contract up and you can download this free checklist and you can check yourself and make sure that these clauses are actually in your client contract. And if they aren't, you can voila, a la carte, copy and paste them into your contract. We have them at the legal page. To download this checklist, all you have to do is head over to thelegalpage.com/free checklist, all lowercase. Again, that's thelegalpage.com/free checklist. And again, that checklist will cover all of the protection clauses that the legal page suggests that you have in your contract, literally for the rest of time. Okay, so hopefully this episode didn't bring you too many horrifying flashbacks from March 2020. And I really hope that I was able to kind of show you and guide you through what the future potentially looks like as events continue to roll on and national shutdowns seem to be a thing of the past. The biggest takeaway from today's episode is protecting yourself and your business is crucial for COVID-19 purposes and for other what-if scenarios. It has been a long 2.5, 3 years since COVID-19 appeared, and clients will honestly still use whatever excuse they can to get out of kind of your core rescheduling and cancellation policies or paying more. Really, they just don't want to pay more. This is why it's so important to adapt your business policies to protect yourself and your assets as the rest of the world adapts to this new normal. COVID-19, my friends, is here to stay. But that doesn't mean that you should be losing money or compromising your business because of it. Make sure that you have your acknowledgement of COVID-19 and no rescheduling clause in your contract. And if you don't have this in your contract, you can go purchase it and head over to thelegalpage.com/no rescheduling. Again, that's thelegalpage.com/no rescheduling, all lowercase. And if you have any additional questions related to this episode and your COVID-19 policies, please feel free to reach out to me and my legal team in the Legal Page Facebook community. You can go join it right now. And I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Legal Page podcast. I am beyond grateful for you, which is why I want to give you a coffee or your favorite bevy on me. If you leave a 5-star rating and review for the Legal Page podcast on iTunes, screenshot the review and send it to me on Instagram at The Legal Page. That's The Legal PAIGE. I will send you a Starbucks gift card from me. Just make sure to include your email in the DM. So again, send a screenshot of the review to me on Instagram at The Legal Page, include your email address, and I will send you some Starbucks, because what better gift than caffeine for every business owner? Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Page podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.